Hello, viewers. I hope you all are doing well in your life and enjoying every bit of your life. And in this video, I will talk about a critical autobiography written by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Some days ago, I got a message from a viewer that I should uh, cover the whole syllabus of fifth semester English major under the Dibrugarh University, and the paper is maybe DSC 3. So with this video, I am concluding the whole syllabus. Okay. So without any delay, now let's begin the discussion about this work. In this video, my discussion will be on chapter which is stipulated by the university. It is maybe three chapter. Okay, now let's begin it. First, we will know little bit about the the author's background and then the works background. So, Biographia Literaria, it was a critical autobiography by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and it was published in 1817 in two volumes. And its working title was given as Autobiographia Literaria. But later, Biographia Literaria was adopted. And the formative influences on this work were Wordsworth's theory of poetry and the Kantian view of imagination as a shaping power, and various post Kantian writers, including F.W.J. von Schilling, and the earlier influences of the empiricist school, including David Hartley and associationist psychology. And these are the elements. These have influenced S.T. Coleridge. Now let's try to know a little bit about Coleridge. Coleridge was born on 21st October 1772 and died 25 July 1834. He was an English poet, literary critic, philosopher, and theologian who, with his friend William Wordsworth, as we all know, was a founder of the Romantic movement in England and a member of the Lake Poets. He has also shared volumes and collaborated with Charles Lamb, Robert Southey, and Charles Lyot. He wrote the poems The Rime of the Ancient Mariner and Kubla Khan, as well as the major prose works like Biographia Literaria, and his critical works, especially on William Shakespeare, was highly influential, and he has helped introduce German idealist philosophy to English-speaking culture. And Coleridge has also coined many familiar words and phrases, including suspension of disbelief and objective correlative, and he had a major influence on Ralph Waldo Emerson and American transcendentalism. Okay, and in addition to his poetry, Coleridge has also written influential pieces of literary criticism, including Biographia Literaria, which we are now discussing, and a collection of his thoughts and opinions on literature, which was published in 1817. And this work, Biographia Literaria, it also depicts both biographical explanations of the author's life as well as his impressions on literature. The collection also contains an analysis of a broad range of philosophical principles of literature, ranging from Aristotle to Immanuel Kant and Schelling, and his theory of poetry and his friendship with William Wordsworth and his similarity as well as dissimilarity with William Wordsworth itself. Okay, and in chapter 14 of Biographia Literaria, Coleridge has taken the subject of lyrical ballads. Lyrical Balance, we have already known. This work was published by William Wordsworth and Samuel Coleridge with their joint collaboration. And with this publication in English literary canon, it was believed that this work has means introduced romantic movement in English poetry. And in chapter 14 of this work, Coleridge has depicted about his friendship with William Wordsworth and how he has collaborated with him. And Coleridge also devoted himself to poetry relating to the supernatural elements, how he was influenced by supernatural ingredients of this planet, and Wordsworth to the wonders of the everyday. These all were delineated in this work. And to the end of this chapter, Coleridge has written that the rhyme of the ancient mariner and other unfinished works, different in kind from Wordsworth's profusion of great poems. Some readers were outraged by Wordsworth's preface, but soon his admirers grew numerous, explaining his differences with Wordsworth. And Coleridge firstly defines a poem and then poetry. Means at the beginning of their friendship, they both though have tried to work together, but still they had some issues, and they had had some disagreements. And these works were discussed in this Biographia Literaria book. And this is that's why it is called as bio an autobiography piece of work. Now let's try to discuss it broadly. Coleridge has considered the imagination to be a primary or secondary. According to Coleridge, the primary imagination is the living power and prime agent of all human perception, and as a repetition in the finite mind of the eternal act of creation in the infinite I am. And the secondary imagination coexists with the conscious will. It is an echo of the primary imagination. The secondary imagination will diffuse, dissipate, and dissolve in order to recreate. These things were mentioned in this text. And in chapter 14, Coleridge talks about him and Wordsworth, how they have decided that a series of poems may be composed of two sorts. The first would be supernatural, and the second would be subject. They choose from ordinary life. This is what led them to the idea of the lyrical ballads, and Coleridge was the one who focused on the supernatural, while Wordsworth focused on the normal or ordinary. Got it? And Coleridge has also discussed about how his poems were not as successful as Wordsworth. But in the first edition, Wordsworth published 19 of the 23 poems, and Coleridge said that his poems made the ballads not flow right. Okay, now let's move on. Coleridge has also talked about in this chapter that what poetry means, what is a poetry, or what poetry means, and he says what is poetry, and it is so nearly the same question with what is a poet, that the answer to the one is involved in the solution of the other. For it is a distinction resulting from the poetic genius itself which sustains, and what the poet is and sustains and modifies the images, thoughts, and emotions of the poet's own mind. Moreover, Coleridge has also delineated about what the poet is in ideal perfection. And he has also added that an ideal poet would bring the whole soul of a man into activity. And he has also stresses that the ideal poet diffuses a tone and spirit of unity that blends and fuses by depth's synthetic and magical power, which is called the imagination. These were the opinions perspective of Samuel Taylor Coleridge in his work Biographia Literaria, chapter 14. And in the chapter 13, Samuel Taylor Coleridge has divided imagination into two parts, the primary and the secondary imagination that we have already discussed sometimes ago, but briefly. And as the living power and prime agent, the primary imagination is attributed a divine quality, namely the creation of the self, the I am. And however, because it is not subject to human will, the poet has no control over the primary imagination. It is the intrinsic quality of the poet that makes him or her a creator. Harking back to Wordsworth, the primary imagination can be likened to poetic genius, and the secondary imagination is an echo of the primary, according to the writer. And it is like the former in every way except that it is restricted in some capacity. It coexists with the conscious will, but because of this the secondary imagination does not have the unlimited power to create. It struggles to attain the ideal but can never reach it. Still the primary governs the secondary, and imagination gives rise to our ideas of perfection. In this way Coleridge and Shelley shared a belief that any imitable forms of creation can only exist in the mind. As soon as the poet decides to write down his or her poem, for example, the work is inevitably diminished. Okay, these are the some of the most pivotal lines that you must mention in the exam if the question comes related to this work. Now let's try to know a little bit about chapter 14. In chapter 14, Coleridge has tried to explain how truth seems to be one of the preoccupations of the romantic poets. And in this sense, the truth of nature will always remain superior to poetry, which is an artifice. Nevertheless, imagination is that aspect of poetry that provides another way of looking at nature so that what is ordinary and familiar can be seen anew. Means through romantic poetry, the romantic poets have attempted to describe same familiar thing in a new and fresh way. Thank you so much for watching the video. Bye bye.